All right, welcome back to HiveMinds, the weekly show from Hive, a global community of leaders committed to creating a better world. You can learn more about Hive at hive.org. HiveMinds is recorded live each week with Hivers from all around the world. Today we have Benjamin Lopez from Nicaragua. Good morning, Benjamin. We have Chris, Danielle, and Charlene calling in from San Diego. Welcome, folks. I see Jorge Rodriguez. Greetings from Mexico. Here's Jorge. Well, our guest this week is none other than Tom Chi. Tom is the CEO of Prototype Thinking and founding team member at Google X. He is an inventor, leader, speaker, and polymath as one of Hive's top-rated speakers. Tom has pioneered and practiced a unique approach to rapid prototyping, visioning, and leadership that can jumpstart innovative new ideas as well as move large organizations at unprecedented speeds. These approaches have benefited over a dozen industry-leading companies. He most recently served as head of product experience at Google X, developing technology such as Google Glass, Project Loon, and Google's self-driving car. Tom's worked in a wide range of roles, from astrophysics researcher to Fortune 500 executive, developing new hardware and software products and services. He's played a significant role in establishing projects with global reach, such as Microsoft Outlook and Yahoo Search, and has scaled new projects from conception to significance, like Yahoo Answers, from 0 to 90 million users. His current focus is delving into human development issues with social entrepreneurs around the globe, supporting companies like BioCarbon Engineering in the field of drone tree planting, Ironox in the field of fully automated pesticide-free agriculture, and Memphis Meats in the field of lab-grown meat for food consumption. Tom, welcome to the show. What's new in your world?
Oh, it's just like that? Okay, let me see. Yeah, basically I'm working on humanity becoming a net positive to nature and finding and investing in and then supporting the projects where it could be like a key element of full system change. I mean, I guess when you say, biocarbons in the field of drone-based planting, really they're in the field of full ecosystem restoration across all the different species that need to be planted and tended. And, something like Memphis Meats or Iron Ox, you can say, well, we don't call it lab-grown meat, we call it cell-based agriculture, but whatever, because it doesn't need to be in a lab, but it doesn't matter. What's important is not so much, the phrase, it's actually more that, we've used 40% of the land surface of the earth to go feed ourselves, including uninhabitable land. If you just talk about inhabitable land, it's a lot more than 40%. And that makes us take a very specific relationship to the earth that we can't really change unless we're able to go change the way that we feed ourselves. So that's the reason for doing those things. Yeah. Oh, and then I'm raising a $150 million venture fund to do a lot more of this, because I've moved maybe about $10 to $12 million to these types of projects over the last 18 months, including some of my own money. But I think it's time to kick that up, factor of 10, and then maybe in 4 or 5 more years, you got to kick it up another factor of 10. So that's kind of what's up right now.
Yeah, you posted a really great video last week called Helping Humanity Become a Net Positive to Nature. I learned a ton, such ideas as invention catalysts and the total weight of ants equaling the total weight of human beings, while at the same time consuming 10 times what humans consume, but being enriching for the nature rather than destructive. And then also you mentioned something called fundamental rights for the natural world. Were just 3 of my takeaways that I learned new words and new ideas that really woke me up to what's possible in regeneration developments. What was the inspiration for that video?
Oh, well, my friend in Ecuador, she's putting on a conference and she invited me to come out because I hadn't seen her in 2 years. And then she's like, you should just talk about some of the things that you're doing recently. And I was like, okay. So I put a talk together about the things that I was doing recently. And then after I finished putting the talk together and showing to people, I guess at the conference, they're like, that's amazing. It's like, oh, well, okay. Like, and they said, what are you doing with that? I was like, well, I mean, I was going to go raise a venture fund because I've basically been doing this investment already, but at the scale that a single human plus some syndicates plus some venture capital relationships can do it, but not at the scale of an entire fund that's dedicated to it. But I mentioned it, when people asked what I was going to do with the work. They're like, "Oh, that's amazing! You should do that right now." So I guess over the last 2.5 weeks, I've been doing that right now because that talk was just given 2.5 weeks ago. And this morning, I had to reach out with a organization that wants to come in for about 10 million, and I'm getting intros to a bunch of the right sort of foundations and people. So it's been a whole interesting 2 weeks. Somewhere in there, I was in Paris for a week too. That's where the video was recorded.
Oh, nice. Well, one of the things you're also working on is another rapid prototyping course. And I wanted to just get into that with our Hivers and folks listening. Can you just describe what is rapid prototyping?
I call it rapid prototyping because it makes it, it's like a descriptive term. Like more fundamentally, it's a way of, having clear cognition about problem solving. And there's a lot that's been written about problem solving and different tools and techniques and all that sort of thing. My focus or my lens on problem solving is basically entirely around efficacy. And what I found from doing a lot of work on a lot of different projects is that most of the concepts that we have are an impediment to solving problems well, because you end up with oh, I filled out my business model canvas, and people have filled out this huge canvas and like literally tried nothing. And to me, that's not necessarily conducive of efficacy. So rapid prototyping basically says, whatever you are going to, whatever you're trying to create, then let's kind of just start creating it, like, today. And a lot of the techniques that I teach, because some people it's like, well, your thing has frameworks and so on and so too, but they're not actually meant to be conceptual frameworks, like I put the right things in the right boxes of my canvas or model. They're actually meant to be motivational frameworks to basically give you no excuses from just actually doing it right now. So that's kind of a practical description. And then a more like meta description is it's a type of hyper-empiricism. It just believes that whatever happens is what happens. And if you wanted to make the world different, you should just do actions until it's different. And that's the way you solve the problem, which sounds like super obvious, but very, very few people do it. There's many, many people that talk about how they want things to be different and then don't do anything in particular.
Cool. It's something that you've used in a lot of different scenarios, as well as advising companies around. How would someone go about using rapid prototyping if they were working on something new right now?
Yeah, I mean, I would encourage to watch some of the videos that I have online, and that'll already give you plenty of clues. And if you, wanted to go in depth in it, then you could take the course. Because I could say something that is accurate, but will probably not be approachable to people, which is whatever it is that you're trying to do, then make the first version of it today. And better yet, make the first version of it in the next hour. And that's actually, that sounds literally impossible, but that's what I generally teach people to do. So in an interview format like this right now, then I can tell you that's what to do, but it's almost like saying, oh, you see that bicycle over there? Jump on there and ride it, even if you've never ridden a bicycle before. So even though that's what you would actually do, pedal your feet and steer the handlebars, then it's not an intellectual skill. It's a thing that you learn by getting on the bike and doing it. So really, I think if you do watch videos online, or even if you do take the course, the whole gist of it is getting on the bike and doing it. And you're going to say, oh, no, but I can't do it because I don't know how to do it. But that's exactly the point. It's like you need to try to do it for you to know how to do it. It seems very counterintuitive because we live with all these phrases which are only partially true, like knowledge is power and we live in the information age and all that sort of thing. But there's a big difference between skill and information, right? Like I can write on a website, how to go swing a tennis racket, but it doesn't mean that the people who read that blog post are actually good at tennis all of a sudden. And we've like really misconstrued this sensibility. It's like, well, I know the information now, so I'm now skilled at this. It's like, no. Like you haven't even started yet. Like actually better than reading anything would be pick up a tennis racket and swing it around a bit and do it until, you make a chunk of mistakes and the occasional good hit, and then have somebody who's skilled and has spent a lot of time, like, spend a little bit of time with you. They obviously don't need to guide you through every tiny thing, but it is we've like super over indexed on the value of information and called the entire thing the information age, and pretended that a lot of things that are just like little informational signaling is the same thing as quality, and it's just not true. So sometimes when people hear the word rapid, they're like, oh, it's going to be lower quality, and it's like, no, you will get to much higher quality if you spend a higher percentage of your time doing the work, as opposed to trying to come up with like some conceptual frame that you've mastered, but like spent almost no time doing the doing.
Yeah, and it's something that can be applied across domains, across disciplines, across the world. It's a really useful framework for that. So Hivers working on tons of different things can think about how they might want to engage this type of process within what they're doing. In fact, we'll have an interactive exercise in a little bit where we can share more on that. Tom, you used this approach at Google X. That must have been a really interesting place to first feel out the technique of what rapid prototyping might look like for humanity's grand challenges.
No, I'd already been doing it for 12 years before I got to Google X. So it wasn't necessarily the feeling out the techniques. I was reasonably comfortable with doing them. It definitely is a different thing to go try to do it for the sorts of projects that we're doing at Google X, but my general experience to date had been, well, as long as the thing happens in the real world, then it can be solved. You can make progress via a hyper empirical approach. And to me, it's kind of like the application of the scientific method, but to creating new things. Because the scientific method is actually structured around understanding things that already exist. So let's use the scientific method in order to go understand how a flower is pollinated, or how a termite mound is built, or what have you. But these things already exist, they work well. But if you could take the clear observation, the desire to try experiments and all that sort of thing from the scientific method, but you can apply it, and you applied it to things that didn't exist yet, then that's some of kind of like the foundational thought behind rapid prototyping. So, a thing like a self-driving car or Google Glass or Project Moon didn't exist yet, but we basically went on a clear-eyed, push of many, many experiments until just through a series of empirical observations of what was tried, we were able to go figure out which things were going to work better and which ones wouldn't.
Cool. Well, in service of rapid prototyping, as we're sort of doing this right now with HiveMinds as we're getting going, I would think it would be cool to have us all just potentially just get up and take a few deep breaths in the middle, just to feel into our bodies a little bit. Little stretching. Tom, where are you right now?
I'm at Schmidt Marine. They have an accelerator which is about projects to protect the oceans or further the health of the oceans.
Nice.
So I'm here to go mentor 22 fellows of the Schmidt Marine. Yeah, from Schmidt
Cool.
Marine.
It's interesting. Empathy is also a theme of rapid prototyping, especially when you're getting user feedback in the ways that you do early on with MVPs and throughout. How do you view the role of empathy in your innovation techniques?
Yeah, I think about it actually more as compassion, but there's some relationship between empathy and compassion. Um, Another thing that happens all the time is that people care more about their ideas than they care about other people. They don't necessarily say it like that, but they'll sit there and be like, "Oh, I got this vision, and it's like going to be the best, and the world's going to be so much better when this happens." And in practice, they'll show it to some people, and people don't like it, and they're like, "Oh, these people just don't understand. If they understood my vision better, then they would know that this is better for them." And that to me is like, that's a compassion gap. People get there for a number of reasons. Like sometimes they're just not used to listening to people well, but other times it's actually to kind of protect some sensibility that, if their idea was wrong, then they're a failure, they're not good enough, or lots of different thoughts like that, where they won't amount to anything. And I have a phrase that attachment is the enemy of innovation. uh, the less that you can be attached to what you're doing and just simply committed to having the world be improved, then the easier things get. So my mom is a Buddhist, so like these little things sneak in, like, lower attachment, higher compassion. And yeah, they are fundamental to the process. I think it also sets it apart from something like lean startup. In lean startup, you treat human beings like LTV numbers and customer acquisition numbers, and you say, well, LTV, lifetime value, is greater than cost of customer acquisition now, so everything's amazing. But when you treat people in this low dimensional way, then it's very possible to lose compassion entirely. Because maybe the reason your cost for customer acquisition went down is that you put advertising out that was misleading. Maybe the reason that the lifetime value went up is you by default checked a thing that charged them every month, even though some of the people didn't notice it. And these are not compassionate acts. This is strictly the opposite. So I have compassion in the fabric of the work just because I don't want a world where we make decisions like that.
Yeah, it's a really important intention to bring into our working lives and our lives in general. Hivers listening, we'd love to hear about some areas in which compassion has been imbued in your actions, or ways in which you found it to integrate within your work and business life beyond just what you're doing for work. Another theme of rapid prototyping is learning rapidly, or sort of having an iterative approach to what you're doing, and having feedback mechanisms in place to help you sort of steer the ship in the right direction. Do you have any sort of examples of how this has been put into action with products or services that you've been working on or advising?
It's basically my entire life. I'm not really sure how to answer the question. Like, it's literally thousands of projects at this point. So it's easier if you actually have a subcategory that you want to hear what was done there than it is for you to be like, can you give me an example?
Sure. How about with Memphis Meats or BioCarbon Engineering, some of your recent investments?
Yeah, sure. With Memphis Meats, we recently were taking a look at the bioreactor design, and has to do with how can you go and sustain the quality level of what they've been producing so far, but at a scale that is more like batch-sized production scale. And it requires you to relook at a lot of things. At biocarbon, then we're learning things, and that's kind of in the technical space. In the biocarbon space, we're learning things about the reliability of local partners and how to go account for because The team was recently in southern Myanmar replanting the mangroves, and there's some local organizations and ecologists and several other people that we're working with out there in order to set the groundwork and have us do the robot part. But really, like a person out there will say that they will do something in a day, and it takes 4 days. And you can look at that and say, oh, it's a disaster. Like, let's go hold them accountable, blah, blah. But you do that enough times and you're like, oh no, actually pretty consistently, if you say a day, it takes 4 days. So how do we go change the way that we work from that learning and, adjust our project estimates and that sort of thing for the parts that are not part of our team. Like in our team, if we say a day, we'll do it in a day. But that's an example of something that's learned more on the human system side as opposed to like the technical system side.
Cool, thanks. Well, folks, we're going to do our first interactive exercise here. So what is something in your work or life that could benefit from the rapid prototyping methodology? And what will be some of the first steps for you initiating this process? We'll take 30 to 45 seconds to just meditate on that. And please enter your answers in the chat box so we can share them. The question is, what is something in your work or life that could benefit from rapid prototyping and some of the first steps to initiating this process? Tom's answer, thanks Tom. I'm raising a $150 million fund and showed some people yesterday, and I'm improving the deck today ahead of sending to other investors. It's exciting stuff. Tom, what's the name of your fund?
Doesn't have a name yet.
Okay, cool. Emily?
The other thing about rapid prototyping, you don't need to be totally ready. You can actually just do it. So it seems like kind of obvious that you should do something like name it before you get started, but no. Starting to get commitments even before it has a name.
Love that. Emily is looking to how to involve partners in our EcoShip project, www.ecoship/pb.com. It's our largest challenge yet, raising $200 million to build the world's most sustainable ship. That is really exciting. Alexandru, he's finding a part-time job that can pay enough so he can quit his day job to start his business. So entrepreneurs at all different levels can find ways in which to apply rapid prototyping to their lives and their work. Andrew's working
on—
What
I would say is like, from these responses, what I'll say though is what you want to put in there is a thing that you want to do, which is what a lot of people are saying, but also a way that you're going to go test an early version of it and learn from that test. So if you saw in mine, like the specific people that I talked with yesterday helped Jeff Skoll set up, the impact side of his investment in the Skoll Foundation. They're like a good tester for the deck that I had at the time. So maybe in the mix, you want to go think about whatever it is I'm trying to get done. What's a cheap way for me to get some feedback on it in a realistic way, in like a 1 day, 2 day time frame.
Interesting, yeah. Andrew is working on an ocean exploration project and is RPing an AUV recovery mechanism. Jason Williams, my organization is starting to develop our 2019 programming calendar. We are interested in introducing some new events, adult camp meets conference, masterclasses, workshops, possibly expanding a 1 day conference to a multi-day. So it sounds like you have—
From Sarah that says, how do you do rapid prototyping within social work without damaging the relationships? And what I'll say is that you can go and start with people that are familiar with the situation or the population that you're working with, but it's more like a friends and family run. So maybe somebody who has been the recipient of social work in the past and is kind of, their life has moved to a better place, but you can kind of pull them aside and say, oh, we're testing this new program. I know you've been in this situation. I want you to imagine, you were back where you were and a program like this existed. And then it doesn't have, the possibility of the negative side effect of, oh, we tested something that wasn't working on, vulnerable population. And this is part of it as well. It's like, how do you go create a situation where you feel comfortable testing, but the test is still valid and gives you interesting information?
Yeah, it's Danielle loves the framework. Charlene adds the idea of taking action now rather than later. Small pivots today can create a huge difference down the line. Indeed. We're actually, as we're beginning HiveMinds, it's a rapid prototyping process in the works. And I have Ryan and Danielle and other people helping to build this show. And so we're definitely applying some of these techniques to what we're doing. Let's move on to our next segment, which is more around the idea of healing the earth. And so we mentioned this video that you created, Tom, last week, covering some of these ideas. We'd love to go into that just a little bit more. Can you start with just the research you did on ants population and their consumption, and what sort of led you to that being a model to use to compare our rates of sustainability?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can just, I can just share what's in the actual talk, or I can just grab the link to the talk. People can watch it later. But the observation was the biomass of human beings and the biomass of all the ants together is basically the same. It's about 350 million tons. And, ants eat a lot more of their body weight per day. So ants eat about 10 times more of the earth per day, because ants eat 30% of their body weight per day, and humans eat about 2.8 to 3% of their body weight per day. So there's this kind of idea that, well, we have too many humans, that's why we're screwing everything up. But no, you have this other organism that has the same biomass as us, literally eating 10 times more than us, but not screwing up the environment. So it's not the absolute number of people per se, or even the amount that the amount of the earth that we're eating, which is a type of consuming, biological consuming. It's not what we're biologically consuming that destroys the earth. It's the way that we do it. Like we'll grow a bell pepper and then wrap it in plastic. It's like, okay, we just figured out some way to put some damage in there, even though eating a bell pepper is not necessarily a thing that destroys the earth by itself. So then the prompt is about, well, if ants can literally consume 10 times more of the earth than us every single day, which they do, and I think it's a good metaphor because ants are omnivores as well. So this is not even a vegetarian versus animal eater type issue, because ants are omnivores. I think they probably eat slightly more animals than plants. But it's to go pose the way, I think, bigger question, which is, how can we create more ecosystem services than ecosystem services that we consume? Because that's the way that ants are able to consume so much. Like, in the process of being in the ecosystems that they're part of, they actually create more life. They create more possibility and help all these other beings exist. So, if ants can figure it out, I'm pretty sure we can figure it out. It's just that we've chosen these local goals, which are a lot smaller and a lot more factional. Like, how does this one person become a billionaire? Or how does my country, outcompete these other countries? Or how do I make it, maximally convenient, like takes the least number of seconds for me to go get this fast food? And when you ask questions like that, and you don't include a thought around, well, how can this whole act create more ecosystem services than they consume, then you just never get around to doing that work. And I actually don't consider that work to be infinitely harder work than all the other axes that we've optimized for. Like, when you really get into details, like optimizing risk models and an actuarial table for an insurance company, I'm going to say it's actually harder than a lot of the work that we've done in terms of trying to figure out how to restore ecosystems. It's just that we decided that was some important work to do, and we went and worked really hard so that we could do that particular act. So this is really a prompt for us to go ask, a more significant question about what's worth doing and get on to doing it.
Yeah, and you coined the concept of an invention catalyst, wherein a new invention creates new opportunities that didn't exist before that invention was there. So, for instance, with self-driverless cars, you have less need for parking lots in cities, which can be turned into parks and actually regenerate the air quality and the ecosystems in cities. Are there any other invention catalysts that you're excited about, or any things in the works, whether it's your investments or different things that you're looking at that create a catalyst of downstream benefits?
Yeah, that's basically all the stuff that I'm working on right now. And not all of it's covered in the talk either. I just picked a couple to be able to go sketch out the thesis for folks. And, when Michelle asked me to do the talk in Ecuador, it's like, oh, you have 40 minutes. So I made something that would fit in 40 minutes. If you actually wanted to sit down and talk about all the invention catalysts, it'd take a long time. I put a link to the talk in the chat so people can just watch it. That's probably the best way to learn all this stuff. I think it's probably better to, in this sort of format, to do something that's a little bit more interactive, because I guess if you ask me the thing and then I answer with the thing that's in the talk, then it actually spreads out the time. It's actually less compact than the talk itself. So it's better to just watch the talk. It's pretty good as talks go, even though I recorded it at 10:30 p.m. after a full work day in Paris. So it's good. You can hear a little European sirens in the background.
Yeah, it was a calm and chill talk, but I learned so much, and we'll definitely add the link to that in the show notes. It's about 35 minutes, and it's sort of a tour de force of Tom's thinking and what he's working on right now that I highly recommend to folks.
It's basically a practical plan, not just to avoid climate disaster, which is the main conversation that we've been having so far. Like, oh, is it going to be a 1.5 degree C disaster, or a 2 degree C disaster, or a 5 degree C disaster? All those are disasters. Even 1.5 is a disaster. You still lose the coral reefs, and you still wipe out 25% of all marine species, and you still wipe out probably 30% of all terrestrial species, and displace more than 100 million environmental refugees, and probably lose, millions to tens of millions of lives. Like, that's the 1.5 C situation. So yeah, I'm just not about it. Like, the thing that's in the talk is a practical plan to not just, go for a less awful situation. It's what would it take for humanity to go bring the health of nature back to what it was before the Industrial Revolution? And then let's live on that planet.
Yeah. Now, this brings us to our next interactive exercise. So if folks at home could think about what they might be able to do to be part of this healing earth, and just take 30 to 45 seconds to think about that. What can you do to be a part of healing earth for all of life? And we can share in the chat box as it comes to you. It does feel hard to try to weigh all these big global decisions when we have, just our local actions that we can have. Folks listening, if you could just put yourselves on mute as we're chatting here, and you can raise your hands if you'd like to be passed the mic. Thanks. Okay, here, Emily writes, one of our goals at Peace Boat, the Eco Ship, is to raise awareness and educate others through original programs, connecting with indigenous communities around the world, and working as a collective towards the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Emily, that sounds like awesome work. Pratik adds, do not ignore the indigenous knowledge. Indeed, it's a good thing to take in different holistic perspectives around what is happening on the earth. Jason Williams adds, to be open to new ideas. And he adds, Tom, that was a great thought to lower our attachments, and to raise compassion. Alejandro says, much of this bottles down to being a leader in the space and to stay consistently vocal, whether it be from the policy side, private sector, etc. Eduardo adds, taking public transit, as Gareth is doing from Gareth has been traveling in Europe, and Robert Gierke from Germany. As a climate leader, I give talks about global warming and the carbon economy. 11% of his profits go to Greenpeace to save the Arctic. That's amazing, Robert. Cool. Well, moving on to our final segment, and then we'll open up for Q&A. Philosophy for a connected world. Tom, I've had the opportunity to hey guys, if you can just put your mic on mute, that would be super helpful. And then what is going on with the video? Okay, well, we'll continue. So our last segment is on philosophy for a connected world. Tom, you gave a talk at Mind Valley, I think a few years ago, on sort of how the world is connected and doing this in both tangible and metaphysical ways. That was quite interesting. We'll post that talk as well in the show notes. How would you describe your philosophy?
It's not a philosophy. It was just an accounting of how stuff works. I think we treat it like a philosophy because we don't really check how things work. But the talk you're talking about, so it was given at Mind Valley. I also did a TEDx Taipei talk, and I did it once on the Summit at Sea boat as well. So I've given the talk 3 times altogether. I just checked online, and, the long version has been seen by more than 1.2 million people. The short version that Mind Valley did a little cut of got seen by 5.3 million people in English, and apparently got translated to Thai and a couple more million people in Thailand. But, I'll tell you what the goal was. The goal was that, you have a number of people that are really material-based and science-based and are very kind of antithetical to any type of spiritual idea. And then you have a lot of spiritual people which are really antithetical to any scientific idea. And we kind of created this false conflict between those 2 ways of being. And for me, it's like, well, that conflict is false, so let me just go make a talk that fixes it. And it's not really a philosophy per se, because I do just kind of walk through how everything works. The talk is called Everything is Connected, Here's How. And the reason I think it creates a bridge, though, between those 2 sensibilities is that it does explain scientifically how a lot of things, in your day-to-day life work. How your heartbeat and your breath and your thoughts, have been built from and dependent on so many other things that have contributed to the possibility of your existence. So it's very scientific in that front, but it speaks to something that, many spiritual traditions, I would say all spiritual traditions, try to touch upon, which is this sensibility of every being part of something greater. And that a type of connectedness and sensibility and order to the universe. So I'm basically describing something that spirituality has been describing for a long time, but in very straightforward scientific ways. And then for the scientists, because that might help the spiritual people kind of feel like, oh, science is not our enemy. Like, science actually illuminates these things that we've been talking about. And then for the scientific people, I describe it in a way that has what I feel like is just enough awe to it, where you understand the sensibility of why people would pursue spirituality, as a mechanism for making meaning in life. Like, science doesn't tell you why your life is meaningful. Science allows you to explore the natural world and understand how it works. But it doesn't necessarily have anything to say in particular about why anybody's life is meaningful. So I think spirituality is one of the things that people use in order to create their personal sense of, what they want to do while they're here and why it matters. And I wanted to kind of bridge these sensibilities, because I think both sensibilities, like a desire to deeply understand how the universe works and a desire to feel like one lives a life that has meaning and that exists in context to all of their life. I felt like I should make a talk that would allow both of those sensibilities to exist without the false conflicts that we've created.
That's excellent. It's really another talk that I highly recommend. So folks listening, this will be our final interactive exercise before we open up for Q&A, but how would you describe your philosophy and how does it impact or inform your work in life? That was, how do you describe your philosophy and how does it inform your work in life? And if you can just take 30 to 45 seconds to reflect on that and please share as you wish. I believe it was the Dalai Lama who said his philosophy is simple. It is kindness. Ryan's philosophy is that everything happens for a reason and that we are here on this planet to learn lessons and deepen in our conscious awareness. That's great. Tom adds, everything and everyone matters. Tragedy is as important than joy, and all of it creates the possibility of an amazing future together. Chris adds, give more. Indeed. Andrew Skotsko, create, adventure, and play. It has me to try and bring a sense of wonder to whatever I do. I try to get up every day, discover what's possible, and help people get the most out of life while marveling in the journey. Everything we do is an opportunity to develop and express who we are. That's beautiful. Thank you. Emily adds, our philosophy is simple. Yes, kindness and collective work towards sustainability in all senses. We work towards creating a culture of peace. We are all in this together, Charlene adds. Alejandro, to develop greater capacity for everyone. And Jason Williams, humans are magical. Every person has a name and every name has a story. Wow, those are some great responses. So in our final segment here, we'll open up for some Q&A. Alejandro has a question for you, Tom. How do we design and reconciliate that in order to save the planet? We must have the ability to connect greater, yet we are living at a moment in the history of mankind where we are living in the most disconnected way. So how do we reconcile this sort of, at the one time we're more connected than ever, yet at the same time we're sort of also feeling more disconnected and polarized?
I think it's because there's a lot of different types of connection. And there's a type of connection which is like, when you connect to wires that connect you to the internet, then that's an obvious like physical connection where electrons move on a wire and help you, post a comment or something. But that is just one sensibility of what connection is. And if you can imagine that there are 100 or more sensibilities of connection. And what's happened is we have prioritized and over-indexed on just a handful of them, let's say 3 out of 100. And then the other 97 feel empty and lacking. So what people will do is they'll just heart your Instagram post. So for example, I posted this talk to Instagram and all of these people hearted it. And some people even left comments. But when I went and looked at the metrics of who clicked through to the talk, it was only 2 people out of all these people that hearted it. And I was like, oh, well, that's very interesting. We created a thing which superficially looks like you connected with it. But in practice, if the people didn't watch the talk, exactly what were they liking? This was, and so you can see that's one sensibility of connection. I guess people had some awareness of it instead of none, but it wasn't another sensibility of connection. Because they didn't actually watch the talk, they didn't get any of the deeper ideas or themes or whatever. I think the in that instance was more just hey, I like you as a person. Cool that you made a talk. And I guess that's better than nothing. But you can see how everybody's losing out there, right? Because I recorded a thing, and it isn't seen, and they kind of said, hey, you're important, but it isn't necessarily felt. So yeah, that explains it. We just use the same word for it, and we don't get into any of the details of all the types of connections, including like one's own connection to their body or to nature. These are other forms of connection that we're losing out on.
Yuka has a question for you, Tom. He says, you mentioned creating safe conditions for rapid prototype testing. What are some hints or gotchas in this development process in the testing phases when using the technique for larger social missions?
Well, you'd actually be surprised. I mean, I said to make it safer, but it's very rare that I guess I've never seen it that something bad happens because you tested too early. So I think people ask this question because they want to feel safe, not because it's actually dangerous to the situation. They want to feel safe from their idea not getting blown up by customers not liking it. And they want to feel safe because talking about an idea and hashing out on a whiteboard is, it's really comfortable. I can give you a bunch of hints, like, what I like to do is if there's any place where this type of person that you're trying to serve, like, congregates, then go to that place and spend time with them and, show them what you're up to. If it's more like of a rare type of person and they don't all like congregate in one specific place, then build individual relationships with them, take them out to lunch once a month, and do that with 4 different people so that there's somebody every single week that you can show it to. There's a lot of different tips. Like if you tell me the specific, type of person you're testing, then I can give you ways to be in contact with them pretty often.
How would you recommend for rapid prototyping as we build out HiveMinds? This is something that we started a few weeks ago and we're testing it right now on Zoom. How could we go about that, embodying that practice in what we're doing here?
I think actually letting people ask questions early, I think this initial format for the first 45 minutes is a little stiff. I like the intention of the interactive parts of it, but it's also, also feels a little bit disjointed. Like, I think the people that you're going to be inviting are people that can handle whatever sort of thing. It doesn't need to be scripted. And especially if a person has got a lot of output of work that you can look up anyhow, then it's great to do something fresh. Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely want to engage our audience as much as possible and make this as interactive as possible. And we found last week that the chat room was a really helpful way to build out engagement. But folks, feel free to type in any questions or raise your hand as well if you'd like to be passed the mic.
Yeah, ask something hard. Everything so far has been, it's pretty chill. Not that chill is bad, but when I do stuff like this, I like kind of gear up to answer something hard.
Okay, Benjamin Lopez has a question. He says, can you use AI to enhance or assist the rapid prototyping methodology? It's a good question.
There's probably not that many opportunities for it because AI basically sucks. And well, I clarified a little bit. The AI that's been most successful so far requires either the existence of a robust training set for which there are correct answers to go train against, or it requires the sort of game that you can put a game with well-defined rules and a way of winning that you can put like adversarial AI into in order to go explore space very rapidly against the well-defined rules. The reason that this would fail for rapid prototyping is that when you're prototyping a new thing and it's never been tried before, you don't have a great training set with pat answers that you can train against. And also, the real world doesn't have the simplicity of rules that chess or Go or these other adversarial AI kind of frames that would support that type of AI. So AI kind of sucks. It like works for, 3 or 4 fun tricks, and those fun tricks have to do with kind of environmental conditions, which are not true of most of the world.
Cool. Gareth, please take the mic. Ask Tom a question.
Really thinking about incentive structures and how to thinking about mindset shifts and behavior change, and how do we enroll people in this vision of increasing ecosystem services and benefits, especially when some of the stakeholders at the table, let's say, don't believe in climate change, or I'm just coming back from this trip from Europe and I'm just noticing there's all these different players at the table. How do we shift those incentive structures in capitalism and governance in our economies and also in our decision making, so that we are focused actually on optimizing towards those variables that you identified?
The rarest asset is people that are motivated to go make something different about the world and have the talent to go and make that difference. One of the worst uses of their time is to spend it arguing with people that have no desire to change their minds about a thing. So my answer to your question is to not do it. What's more helpful is, how many people were on the tree planting drone team before they were able to go figure out how to have drones plant trees? It's like 7 or 8 people. You know how many people were on the self-driving car team before they solved a huge percentage of the problems in self-driving? It's like 6 people. Like, go and find, 3 people, 8 people that really, really care about the thing that you're trying to do, and go full bore. Because having to come up with different compromises and, oh, how do we get this person to do this? And they only accepted one, idea out of these 10, which is essential. That's a waste of your time. And you are the rarest resource, like a person who's deeply motivated to make a difference and has the skill and time to go do so. Don't waste the rarest resource on something that's common.
Cool. And Andrew Skotsko has a question about dealing with larger abstract problems such as the environment. Do you have any suggestions for connecting your motivation to what you're doing? He describes himself working on multiple projects in this avenue, but feeling a lack of engagement or a ability to stay with it through the long haul or the marathon of this work. So how do you stay connected and motivated to solve these large scale problems that sometimes don't feel like they're part of our day-to-day lives?
Well, the thing is that if it is a large abstract problem to you, then that is instantly a way to become disempowered and unmotivated. In fact, I have a little phrase that I teach people, which is, the formula for disempowerment is to make your problems large, abstract, and far from you. And the formula for empowerment is to make your problems small, concrete, and close to you. And for me, this environmental stuff is not large, abstract work. It does affect a thing that can have large scale impact. But yesterday I went and visited Iron Ox and ate their latest crop of produce, and it was fucking delicious. And there's basically nothing abstract about that. And, if you work on a bioreactor, there's nothing abstract about that. If you are trying to close a funding round for a company that's not on the deck called Tro, then there's nothing abstract about that. So to the extent that you're working on problems in a way that they're abstract to you, then that's part of the issue. Like, try to go find a small concrete chunk which is within your scope of ability and action, and just stick with that, and know that all the big things that have ever been made is just a collection of small concrete and close action.
Cool. Jason Williams asks, Tom, what downstream event from new technology are you most excited about, and what is one that concerns you?
Yeah, one that doesn't concern me is like AI, apocalypse, singularity. And it's all bullshit. I can go into a lot more detail on that, but the stuff that people are specifically talking about is all bullshit. So don't worry about that one. The thing that is, super concerning is we are actively in the process of wiping out life on Earth. We're extincting species at 1,000 times the base rate that species would normally be extincted. That's kind of a big deal. And that's what we're literally doing right now. It's not some future scenario where we go and start doing that. And I don't think that is morally acceptable at a basic level. So that's the thing that concerns me. It's part of what I'm working on. And then what excites me? I don't know if technology in particular excites me. I think it's what will humans be when they have a different relationship to each other and the earth? That's kind of a thing. I think that's way more interesting than how will human beings become cyborgs and upload their brains. Like that's boring because there's something about that which is like, it's like copying what you have as opposed to actually generating something that is combinatorially new and rich.
Alejandro says, Tom, why don't you run for president?
I was born in Taiwan. It's illegal to run for president here.
Oh, man. Well, Tom, we're coming up on the hour. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and doing what you do. Every Hive event that we have, it's always such a pleasure to have you speak and keep things new and fresh and always engaging. Brian Kurtz wants to know, are you coming to New York City anytime soon?
I am in the 1st and 3rd week of November or something like that.
Cool. And you're based in the Bay Area, Tom?
I live in San Francisco and Hawaii.
Nice, nice. Well, where can folks check out more of your work, or where would you like to bring attention to in terms of the different things that you're working on?
Well, you can watch those 2 talks. Like the Vimeo one literally just got made. You know, I finished editing and posted it on Sunday, so that's pretty up to date. And like the climate damage numbers are all up to date as of like a week ago. So that's as fresh as you can get. Oh, and there's no models in there. It's like just literally what we've done so far. And that's on purpose. There's no models in my thing because I'm not guessing about anything. So check out that talk. And then Everything is Connected talk is definitely one of the best talks I will do in my life. Like, I think when you get old enough, there's a point in time where you look at some of the things that you did and you're like, that's definitely one of the best ones I'll ever do. And that's okay, because people only live so long, and that's one of them. So if you want to go see something like that, then watch that talk.
Well, we'll definitely make sure to link to all those talks in the show notes. And Tom, your website is tomshi.com. Are there any social media channels or anything else that you'd like to share on?
Oh yeah, my Twitter and Instagram are at the good Tom Shi. I think I have 40 tweets after 9 years or something. But I have all these Instagram posts, which I don't think means anything because people just heart your thing, and I'm terrible at Instagram. I think kind of on purpose. I'm terrible at Twitter on purpose too. It's awesomeness. Like on Twitter, what I wanted to do was I wanted to do the opposite of Twitter. Instead of things that you can read and forget, and it's like, so last Tuesday, this tweet from today is I wanted to write things into my Twitter that you could literally ponder for a year or 10 years and there'd still be a lot. So I put all the wrong stuff into Twitter and I put all the wrong stuff into Instagram. My Instagram's not visually nice. Yeah. I guess I'm doing it on purpose, but yeah, it makes me not particularly successful at those channels. It's okay. It's a hobby.
All right. Well, thank you so much. As Alejandro says, you are a Jedi Master, Tom, and we really appreciate your work and all that you're up to. So thanks, folks. That'll be the end of this week's HiveMinds, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you, Tom.
No
Thanks,
problem.
everyone.